If you ever wish to start a conversation with a single young woman in New York City, I highly recommend opening with how much you hate the current dating scene. The eye rolls and looks of horror you will receive is confirmation enough that the current dating scene is failing women. It is well documented that our romantic landscape has changed vastly in the 21st century. Dating apps, a more casual approach to sex, and a cultural emphasis on personal autonomy have shifted the priority of dating away from long-term commitments and towards hookups. Dating culture is characterized today mostly through the widespread use of dating apps. The average age of marriage has risen to over 30 in most developed nations. In my view, there's nothing inherently wrong with prioritizing autonomy or having casual sex, but I can't ignore the recent data that 1/3 of young women aged 18 to 29 report being lonely in the US. And I can't ignore the frustration of my friends and coworkers who just seem entirely lost in a sea of meaningless swiping and text relationships that go nowhere. All of us millennials and Gen Zers know what it feels like to be ghosted or love bombed, to be completely swept up by someone just for them to disappear, and you are left on red wondering what on earth happened. In many ways, the issue is that dating in 2025 is lawless. There are no rules to abide by, so there is less clarity on relationship stages and expectations, making it harder to navigate the transition from casual dating to commitment. Enter in the dreaded situationship that has become commonplace. There seems to be a dating epidemic, the fear of commitment. The ease of finding new partners on dating apps discourages people from fully investing in a relationship. Taylor Swift is one of the most famous people on Earth. She is in a league of some of the most photographed women of all time. That includes Queen Elizabeth, Princess Diana, and Marilyn Monroe. Her every move is studied, from her clothing choices to her song lyrics. She is such a cultural phenomenon that there are even college classes devoted to dissecting her influence. For me, what I've always found passively interesting about Taylor is her taste in men. Taylor has a pattern of dating the most coveted man of the times. In 2008, she dated Joe Jonas, the same year the Jonas Brothers released their biggest single to date, Burning Up. In 2009, the Twilight Saga released New Moon, and she dated star Taylor Lautner. In 2012, at the height of One Direction mania, she briefly went out with HarryStyles. And as Marvel movies were breaking box office records in the mid-2010s, she was with Tom Hiddleston. I'm not passing judgment on who Taylor dates and why, but I think it is safe to say that Taylor goes for the man of the moment. Her tastes seem to mirror what most women of her time are looking for in a man. So when she started dating a football star last year, my ears perked up. I had to ask myself, what does it mean when Taylor Swift starts dating a professional athlete? And what does that say about what women are looking for in a man in 2025? The man of the moment is often a Hollywood leading man or a famous musician, but not always. The man of the moment has been the president, if we look at JFK or Barack Obama, or an athlete like Cristiano Ronaldo. And sometimes the man of the moment isn't a real man at all, like Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. Where women find their new man of the moment isn't important. The question is why? Why this man? Why this moment? Some people would make the argument that all a man needs to be part of this conversation is a pretty face with maybe a little charisma. But that is far from the truth. Take Bruce Willis or Joaquin Phoenix. Both are handsome, thoughtful, and talented, but they are two men that women haven't flocked towards. On the other hand, Pete Davidson, not a super conventionally handsome guy, stole the hearts of many women during his time on SNL. The male gaze describes the way women are viewed in film and media as objects of desire from a male point of view. The female gaze, on the other hand, serves as a gender-swapped counterpart, in which men are portrayed through a female point of view. It would be very difficult to nail down one man of the moment when the tastes of women are so vast and contradicting. Some women do not understand the appeal of Adam Driver's quiet intensity or Benedict Cumberbatch's witty intellect, where other women see them as their ultimate dream man. Some women spent 2017 drooling over Chris Hemsworth in Thor Ragnarok, while others were being introduced to their new celebrity crush, Timothée Chalamet, in Call Me By Your Name. And in some cases, it was the same woman doing both. And certain women will be drawn to certain types of men regardless of the social climate. However, there have been times throughout our modern dating history where one kind of dream man is dominating most women's minds. tastes in men seem to follow trend cycles, just like tastes in fashion, music, and everything else. That is why when we look at the history of leading men, we'll be using archetypes to describe who young heterosexual women have been drawn towards over the years. In Jungian psychology, archetypes are described as patterns of instinctual behavior contained in the collective unconscious, a consciousness that is universal, not individual. Behaviors and motivations that are the same across time and cultures. We can compare men from different time periods or entirely unrelated places and find similar patterns in how they behave. The Byronic hero, a literary archetype inspired by the early 19th century poet, can be found in stories about men in the 2020s. Young women of the 1950s seem to be drawn to the rebellious leading man. The rebel may be without a cause, but this kind of leading man always worked outside of the norms of his culture. He is often labeled by the mainstream as provocative, defiant, and shocking. He is the outlaw, going against the grain. He craves freedom and authenticity. These men are the definition of cool. They view conformity as a kind of death and are often seen as symbols of sexual or social liberation. As we will see for all of the archetypes, the rebellious man will appeal to many women no matter the social climate. But the rebel seems to really shine during times of traditionalism, where mainstream culture values stability and is highly regulated. When women are feeling forced into boxes, they look for a man who represents freedom. The peak of desirability of this archetype was during the 1950s, when young women were fawning over men like Elvis Presley, James Dean, and Marlon Brando. Dean and Brando eroticized the rebel archetype in film, and Elvis followed their lead with music. When Elvis started gaining popularity, he was met with initial backlash from older generations. They saw his intense and sexually provocative performance style as the personification of evil. He was considered by some to be a threat to the moral well-being of young women because Elvis Presley didn't just represent a new type of music, he represented sexual liberation. Similarly, James Dean is the first notable figure of the 1950s youth rebellion. His defiant and effortlessly cool performance in 1955's Rebel Without a Cause spoke to the youth of the 1950s, who were feeling stifled by the restrictive culture. Marlon Brando taps into another aspect of the rebel archetype: fighting for a cause. Brando was known as Hollywood's bad boy and was difficult to work with. He was passionate and intense about his craft, and he channeled that intensity into activism and charitable work later in life. Elvis said in a 1956 interview with Lloyd Shearer for Parade magazine, "I've made a study of Marlon Brando, and I've made a study of poor Jimmy Dean. I know why girlies, at least the young ones, go for us. We're sulkin', we're brooding, we're something of a menace. You can't be a rebel if you grin." Pop culture of the 1980s brought us a new kind of heartthrob, the golden boy. Young women of the decade were infatuated with the young, fresh, and spontaneous brats that graced their television screens. The golden boy archetype refers to a young man who is exceptionally successful. Often described as perfect, he is held in high esteem due to his charm, talents, good looks, and seemingly effortless achievements. In some respects, the popular culture of the 80s reflected the era's political conservatism. The embodiment of the decade's ideals were the yuppies, short for young urban professionals, or young upwardly mobile professionals. Men and women in large cities with a college education, a good-paying corporate job, and expensive taste. Working in a highly consumerist culture, yuppies were known for being ambitious, sociable, and materialistic. They strived to look the part of a successful up-and-comer in cosmopolitan society. The work hard, play hard mindset dominated their lives, going out to exclusive cocktail bars, buying designer suits, and living in luxury skyrises. In contrast to the 1950s, the average young woman of this time wanted a man to fulfill his expected role in an image-obsessed culture instead of revolt away from it. Young women found the yuppie lifestyle appealing and aspirational, which is why the golden boy archetype seemed to speak to them. The most obvious example of this archetype were the young actors who starred in many of the teen dramas throughout the decade, labeled the Brat Pack by New York Magazine writer David Bloom in 1985. The pack included Emilio Estevez, Rob Lowe, and Judd Nelson. Bloom said of the group, a roving band of famous young stars on the prowl for parties, women, and a good time. Rob Lowe stands out for his pretty face and being a notorious ladies' man as the perfect golden boy archetype. Other golden boys of the time include Tom Cruise, Patrick Swayze, and Matthew Broderick's character Ferris Bueller in the 1986 movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. An important note is that this archetype is labeled as a boy, not a man, showing that part of the appeal is inherently linked to age. If an older man had these character traits, he wouldn't be nearly as desirable. Ambition and a thirst to prove oneself is only admirable for young people. It is seen in our culture as desperate when older men act the way yuppie golden boys act. Other attractive male archetypes that I have identified include the debonair, suave, charismatic, wealthy, worldly, and intelligent, men like JFK, Cary Grant, James Bond, George Clooney, and Michael B. Jordan, the boy next door, a kind, patient, funny, supportive man, think Tom Hanks, Ryan Gosling, and Tom Holland. TikTok has recently coined the term golden retriever boyfriend as a knockoff of the boy next door archetype. The dandy, fashionable, and flamboyant men like HarryStyles or Prince, who blur the lines of traditional masculinity to create an androgynous allure, and the poet, artistic, emotional, and intelligent men who draw women in with their mysteriousness. Most of the men Taylor Swift seems to gravitate towards, prior to her current relationship with football player Travis Kelce, would fit into the archetype of the poet. All of her previous boyfriends are fellow musicians, actors, or entertainers, which is why the shift to dating an athlete feels like a significant change for Taylor, and in turn, for dating culture at large. The man of our current moment is finally starting to take shape, and he is slightly different from the men we have discussed thus far. He is a complete shift away from the poetic and effeminate Timothée Chalamet's of the world. The man of 2025 is the Hercules man. Strong, reliable, happy-go-lucky, and action-oriented. The archetype of the Hercules man is inspired by the ancient Greek hero Hercules, who is famous for his strength, courage, and many dangerous adventures. This kind of man is the jockey class clown. He is bold and outspoken, but has a teddy bear soft side to him. He is a man of action, so he wants to make the first move and plan the dates you go on. He might not be an intellectual or theoretically motivated, but he's happy to go with the flow of the moment. Travis Kelce was the first example of this kind of man coming into the mainstream. Taylor Swift's dating history up until this point has consisted of leading men during their golden boy era or poets. The Hercules man was definitely not her type, but she went for him anyway. A new report from the Morning Consult found that 64% of Gen Z and millennial women now hold a favorable view of the NFL, the highest figure ever. Women viewership of football hit its peak last year, and all signs point to this being Taylor Swift's doing. The groundwork was set for the Hercules man to have his moment in the spotlight, and has finally been solidified thanks to Netflix, who released the second season of Ryan Murphy's show Monsters late last year. This season dramatized the true crime case of the Menendez brothers and starred breakout actors Cooper Koch and Nicholas Alexander Chavez. My best friend texts me saying we should watch it because the internet is obsessed with one of the brothers. When she told me this, I assumed that the internet was fawning over the boyishly handsome, quiet, and thoughtful Cooper Koch who played Eric Menendez, but I was wrong. The women of the internet were blowing up about the brutish, loud-mouthed, and funny Nicholas Alexander Chavez, who played Lyle Menendez. Young women seem to be drawn to his intensity. Nicholas's character is shown to be fiercely loyal, a trait women find is lacking in the current dating scene. In the world of dating apps and situationships that exist almost entirely through text, seeing a man be so devoted to his loved ones speaks to them. Hercules was also known in mythology for his appetite for wine, food, and sexuality with both women and men. This more open view of sexuality is part of what sets the 2025 Hercules man away from some of our other hyper-masculine archetypes. He is modern. He is in touch with the wants and needs of women. He is unbothered by the ambition of his partner. And like the TikTok famous golden retriever boyfriend, He is happy to go along for the ride. Even when looking purely at physicality, the leading men of cinema in the past 2 years are surprisingly similar in stature to the most famous portrayals of the Greek hero. I think what is drawing young women to the Hercules man is they need a hero. Not to be saved like a medieval damsel in distress, but they need someone to end the madness of dating, to stop the games and commit to something. To be a hero is to give something your all despite the challenges. Young straight women of 2025 want someone to stand up for them, to not play the mind games of not looking for anything serious. The Hercules man feels like the kind of guy who will show up. Women looking for a Hercules man are tired of guiding their current relationships, are tired of asking, "What are we?" and trying to push the men along. They want to step back and have their partner take some responsibility. And I can't blame them. Love is hard enough without the online mind games.